14 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and a motion adopted on April 7th, 2022. The committee is meeting to hear from Minister of Fisheries, Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard and officials on the issue of capelin fishing regulations impeding weir fishing in the Charlevoix region of Quebec. This meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. For those participating by video conference, which I think is everybody, when you are ready to speak, click on the icon to activate your mic and please speak slowly and clearly for the interpreters. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. Interpretation is available for this meeting and you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English or French. Please inform me immediately if interpretation is lost and we'll ensure to restore before resuming. For members on Zoom, please use the raised hand function to speak or alert the chair. I'll remind everyone that all comments should be addressed through the chair. I'd now like to welcome the Honourable Joyce Murray, Minister of Fisheries and Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard, who will be with us for the first hour, and of course our officials who have joined us virtually as well for the full 2 hours. From the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, we have with us once again Mr. Timothy Sargent, Deputy Minister. We have Mr. Adam Burns, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister of Fisheries and Harbour Management. We have Sylvain Vezina, Regional Director General from the Quebec region. And of course, from here in Newfoundland and Labrador, we have Mr. Tony Blanchard, Regional Director General. We'll of course welcome, we've got some substitutions in there today. I understand Jenna Stubbs, MP for Canada Carleton, is subbing in. Jaime Batiste, MP for Sydney Victoria, is also joining us. And there was to be one other, Francesco Sabaro, for the member from Vaughan Woodbridge, will be joining as well. So
Greetings, Ken. I'm here.
Okay, good. Minister, will now go to you for opening remarks for 5 minutes or less. And I don't know if any of the officials are speaking as well, but you can let us know if they are when you're ready.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chair, and to colleagues, regular and subs to this committee. It's a pleasure to join you from my home on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish Nations, and to attend with senior officials from Fisheries and Oceans Canada. So for those who would prefer to hear my remarks in English, please use your interpretation. Le capelin est un petit poisson pélagique.
Capelin is a small pelagic fish widely distributed throughout the Gulf of the St. Lawrence and play an important role in the marine ecosystem as a key forage species for numerous marine fish, mammals, and seabirds. In the estuary and Gulf of the St. Lawrence, which represent the Northwest Atlantic Fisheries Organization Division's 4RST, capelin is managed as a single stock. The spawning season of the stock begins in the upper estuary in late April and early May and progresses eastwards and northwards in July and August. Newfoundland and Labrador region is the department's lead region managing the 4RST capelin stock. Its management is conducted through a multi-regional advisory process involving the department's Quebec and Gulf regions, as these three regions have fish harvesters with fishing access to the stock. The 4RST capelin fishery dates back over 100 years. It is currently managed on the basis of a single total allowable catch.
Can you try moving your boom up a bit between your, say, your higher than your upper lip? There you go. Up.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of popping coming. Yeah, it sounds much better now.
All right, good. Sorry about that.
Historically, Gulf capelin have been mostly landed by the Newfoundland seiner fleet in Area 4R, the area of the Gulf of St. Lawrence near the western coast of Newfoundland. Quebec capelin fisheries do not occur in that portion of the Gulf and instead only take place in areas 4ST, the eastern portion of the northern Gulf and in the southern Gulf. The province has a small-scale weir fishery in the estuary that has opened on May 1st in previous years, while the main fishery in Quebec occurs in June in areas 4S, off the coast of Blanc-Sablon on the Quebec lower north shore. As mentioned, the capelin weir fishery in the estuary is small in scale, with only 2 active license holders. This fishery targets capelin during beach spawning events. In April 2021, the license holders involved in the capelin weir fishery in the estuary requested the advancement of the opening date of their fishery to April 1st, from the usual May 1st opening. At that time, the 2021 Stock Assessment and Advisory Committee had already taken place, which were respectively held on March 18, 2021 and on March 26, 2021. The next 4RST capelin stock assessment is scheduled to begin on April 20th, 2022, and the Advisory Committee meeting will be held a few days later on April 25th. The request by license holders to advance the opening date of the capelin weir fishery in the estuary will be discussed at the 25th of April Advisory Committee meeting. As part of the ongoing process to evaluate the advancement of the opening date of this fishery to April 1st, starting in 2023. Following the stock assessment on the 20th and 21st of April and the Advisory Committee meeting on April 25th, I have asked officials to prepare options in consultation with the industry that could allow weir fishermen to open before May 1st if the assessment is positive. This consultation approach regarding modification to management measures is consistent across all fisheries in Canada. I would be happy to answer any questions related to this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We'll now start our rounds of questioning, and up first for 6 minutes or less, Mr. Perkins.
Hi, Minister. Thank you very much for joining us today in this unusual meeting during our constituency breaks. I appreciate your accommodation of Madame Debane's request. So thank you very much. And also to my colleagues, our colleagues on the committee for putting aside time for this. Minister, in your opening remarks, you mentioned that you're looking at this for next year, and I appreciate that. The meeting that was held in March of the advisory committee of this year, was there no consultation with the weir fishermen before that meeting?
Well, thanks for that question, Mr. Perkins. And we always do consultation with the fish harvesters involved in a fishery, and that's done after the departmental experts have looked at the data and analyzed it and brought it together. So then the options are presented to in those consultations. And I'll ask my staff if there's any other details they'd like to add.
Sylvain, perhaps you can comment on this one.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The evaluation hasn't taken place. It took place last year in March, and this year the consultation is planned for the 25th of April. And so in a week or so, just a little over a week.
Okay, thank you. Is that it from the officials? Okay. My next question, Minister, and through you, Mr. Chair, I was looking at the Integrated Fisheries Management Plan for capelin in 4ST, and I was wondering in what year did that Integrated Fisheries Management Plan first get launched?
Well, thanks. I'll ask the officials to answer that question about date.
Sylvain?
Unfortunately, I would, since the fishery is managed by my colleague, Tony Blanchard, I would ask him to answer this question, please. Thank you.
Sure, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure of the exact date. I can check that, and because some of these plans are updated.
It would be 10 years
regularly.
ago, maybe 5 years ago, just generally.
Likely around 10, but I'll get the date and
thank you. Thank you. I don't need the specific date. I was just looking generally for the year, and it's updated every year with the latest thinking or understanding.
Not necessarily the document is updated every year, but it could be every 2 years, and then it's updated with whatever the latest information is at the time. Okay, so it might have been 2 years ago. This was updated over last year. Okay. Yes. When I go through it, can the minister or perhaps one of the officials tell me what science was done to determine the abundance of the stock in the assessment that we have in this plan and the annual TAC that's done?
Well, thanks for that question. And my understanding is that there is a number of different elements that go into this, and it includes several new elements this year, including data as to what groundfish are eating in the area. So because there is a variety of types of data that have to then be harmonized, is part of the process before the actual assessment of TAC can be confirmed.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Section 2.4 of the plan states that there is no direct abundance survey for capelin in the estuary in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. However, planning for a survey is ongoing. Can one of the officials or the minister tell me how long has that planning for the survey been going on, and when might we start seeing a regular abundance survey of capelin in this area?
I'll pass that to my officials to answer.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, pour la question.
Thank you for the question. Yes, for capelin, the data are fairly limited, and that's why we're trying to improve them. Right now, the data that we have are based on the declared commercial catches, and we also have some information from the seiners in Newfoundland and some data from the shrimp fishermen that have been taken into account, as well as information about the commercial catches for various fishes. So with this information, we're trying to have a better understanding of what's going on. There's some indicators that have been compiled based on all of those data and applied to capelin, and so we're gradually getting better data on the capelin, and we're hoping to be able to provide more information to the committee meeting that's going to be held later this month.
Have direct abundance science?
Non, pas pour le moment.
No, not for now.
I think that's my time, is it, Mr. Chair?
It is, sir, indeed. We'll now go to Mr. Morrissey for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon from PEI, Madam Minister. My question is just a couple. I want to get a better understanding of this fishery. So I understand this committee is meeting because of an impact on 2 weir fishers. Is that correct? There's only 2 that are licensed to fish?
That's correct.
And they have requested moving the opening date from May 1 to April 1?
That's correct.
And in the past, on the opening date, has the Weir fishery been able to exploit their quota of the resource, their part of the resource?
That I'll have to ask my officials whether they were able to fully exploit their portion. I know it's a very small portion of the overall fishery.
But were they able to catch the amount they were allowed to? Who could answer that?
Oui, bonjour, merci pour la question, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you for the question. For the capelin fishery, it's a quota that's global. It applies to the entire region. But since capelin, okay.
Fine then. So, what I want, my next question to Minister would be, and to officials, it's just part of a global quota. What is the affected capelin fisheries in this region? Does it include outside of the area designated for the Weir fishery? Is the same stock a stock that's part of this global quota that impacts all the Gaspé region? What could you just explain a little bit more? Are we just talking the geographic area where these two Weir fishers are, or is it a larger geographic area affecting other fishers?
Well, I know that it's all managed as one stock, and yes. Any sub-stock elements, perhaps Mr. Vizina can answer.
Could you tell how many fishers are licensed to fish this quota that could be exploited by the Weir fisher?
Yes, merci pour votre question, Monsieur le Président. Il y a seulement...
There are only 2 fishers who are doing Weir fishing, and they are focused in an area where there aren't any other capelin fishers. And here we're talking about 4T region, and the others are in the 4S, which is near Blanc-Sablon, so right near the border with Labrador. I was wondering if my colleague had the answer to that. Tony, do you have the answer to that?
That number right now, but we're probably in a range of 300, but I'll get a that's in the entire stock area, but I'll get a better number for you shortly.
Okay, and the reason for my question, Minister, is there is a long history of having advisory committees that are consulted with before making substantive changes within the fisheries. So if a change is made here, my question goes to then there's a potential impact in a larger area because there is one stock here in a particular geographic area, including other parts of Quebec, including the Gaspé and the Labrador. Would I be correct in that opinion, Minister?
Well, yes, because it's one stock, managed as one stock, and also there is always a precedent set. If a decision is taken, for example, to make a change without doing a full consultation with others. Now, to the member, I think one of the things that's relevant here also is that that the Weir fishery has always opened on the 1st of May because ice conditions didn't allow for the spawning biomass to come on the beaches for the Weir fishery before then. Last year was an unusual year when the weather was warmer, the ice melted earlier, and the fishery could have been prosecuted earlier. But May 1st for 10 years has been just fine. That's why we are consulting with the harvesters as to the possibility of making an opening April 1st from here on, even though it's likely the area will be iced in and they won't be able to utilize it. Because climate change is changing the patterns, there could be another year of early opening and early ice melt. And in that way, if there is agreement on April 1st for the Weir fishery itself, that will enable these two fishers to pursue what I consider a culturally significant and important fishery in the Charlevoix area.
Chair, what's my time?
30.
Okay, I got a little time. Minister, it's my understanding, and I'm not overly familiar with capelin, but caplin's a fish resource that's prone to wide fluctuations in biomass. Is that correct?
Well, that's my understanding as well.
So getting management right is extremely critical to the long-term availability of this resource. Is that a fair conclusion?
Well, absolutely. And getting widespread input into the TAC and the opening dates is very important. It doesn't work to freelance and do openings that are not set in the frame for the capelin stock for a particular year.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. We'll now go to Madame Desbiens for 6 minutes or less, please.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank everyone for attending. I know that everybody was mobilized to attend this meeting, and I would like to thank everyone. I would like things to have gone differently, but I mean, this was my last resort, really, given what is happening in my area. Unfortunately, there could be some very negative fallout if we don't address this. So I think that we have to recognize that we mobilized or used an awful lot of energy. All of the members of this committee, the interpreters, the clerk, the technical team, and you, my colleagues, we are expending a lot of energy here to deal with a very small thing here that would have a huge impact on the continuity of these two fisheries. And that is why this meeting today is so important. I would first like to tell you about the issue at hand. Madam Minister, what exactly do you know about capelin fishery? Has any of your team ever actually been present and actually witnessed what it is to do capelin weir fishing?
Team, Madame Desbiens, but there are many fisheries that I have not been present at, which I learn about as the minister, and working with my department and the science, make decisions accordingly. And just in terms of the importance of this meeting, I agree. En même temps, j'ai eu l'opportunité de
At the same time, I did have the opportunity to respond to your request to hold a meeting. We discussed this, and I asked the department to pay attention to your request, and that is why we are here today. And we are hoping that we're going to have an earlier opening date this year and certainly in further years. Well, that's music to my ears to hear that there will be special consideration made for our fishers. Two things. We are here this afternoon. First, to let you and your team know that the smallest impact on the resource that the capelin fishery can have maybe not be sufficient consideration to completely get rid of that fishery. So in that perspective, what we want is a moratorium or a special permission within a special definition of the carrying out of that fishery with regard to the small impact it has on the stock. I can assure you that there's a lot of capelin out there, and there are some capelin that you can see on the shore, and they're being eaten by the seagulls. But what people want is fresh fish immediately. Every day counts for the fishers because they fish small quantities each day. But every day, those catches are distributed, they're processed immediately, and the result is very satisfactory, especially for local purchase. Madam Minister, is there any opening so that tomorrow we will be able to let these fishers go and do their fishing? There are a lot of citizens waiting for capelin. There's a high demand. Secondly, can we invite our two fishers to the consultation table so that they can explain everything to your scientists and they can present their arguments and their sound reasoning? It's not because they want to fish on the 1st of April. They want to be able to fish when the capelin is available, when they are there. Thank you very much. Madam Chair, I have already heard that point with regard to the life cycle of capelin and that it will have a minimum impact. What's very important to understand is that we manage many fisheries throughout Canada. And so to have public confidence and that of the fishers, we have to have a framework as to how to fish, when to fish, who can fish, how to fish, and that's very important. You have to have a good framework to ensure public trust in our department. Now, you are asking me to break the rules. I am asking the department to find a way to open for the fishery to open a little bit earlier this year and in subsequent years. And Mr. Chairman, I think I still have a little bit more time. Thank you for your answer, Madam Minister. Why wait?
So hardly time for a question or an answer. So I'm sure we'll get back to you again during this portion of the meeting. I'll now go to Ms. Barron for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here today. Taking in all this information that we're talking about today, and I'm wondering if you can clarify, Minister or staff, a little bit more about what the consultation process that you're referring to would look like with those impacted if this date were to be moved up a month this time next year.
Well, thanks, and I will ask the ministry officials to answer that.
So if we move the fishery date up a month to April 1st, which is what we are considering doing, and what the meeting that will happen later in this month will consider, we would need to make sure that the science assessments that we need to do for that assessment meeting are then done in time so that we can have the meeting in March.
Thank you. The science that's used, so I know that previously, there's been benchmarks that's used in making these decisions. And so what would that look like as far as the science that would be used to support the decision to move up the date by a month? Can you expand a little bit more on that?
Sylvain?
Bonjour, merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. Essentially, it's because the work that's required to assess the fish stock is quite extensive. And so there was some work done in the fall, and then a number of analyses are carried out. The scientific consultation process calls on a lot of scientists to do their work. So it's a long-term job that has to be planned ahead of time in order to get all of the correct information in order to make a proper assessment of the resource.
Thank you. And what would this look like as far as the impacts on the entire area? I know that we're talking about the two where fishers that are within Madame Debier's riding are, sort of our main topic of discussion here, but also they are within a larger area. What would be the impacts? Would this change, in your opinion, Minister, actually provide the outcome that is intended to benefit those who are feeling that they're not able to fish the capelin that they are seeking?
Well, thanks for that question. And my understanding is that for most of the recent past, May 1st has been an adequate starting date to enable the weir fishery to take place. Because of the ice in the river, the fish don't come before that period. In fact, the capelin are fished in other parts of its habitat far later, in May, even in June. So were we to move this date forward to April 1st, my understanding is that most years the two weir fishers would still not be able to start any earlier than they have been historically on May 1st. It does mean if there should be an unusually warm year, ice is melted sooner, they would be able to go out and do their weir fishery before May 1st and after April 1st.
Thank you. Trying to understand all the moving pieces, because I can appreciate that with climate change, we're going to see continued changes to the patterns that we're seeing in fisheries, and perhaps the way things have been done historically will no longer work. And so I appreciate that willingness to always be reevaluating. But I'm wondering if the approach that's being taken with the, the 4S area that we're speaking about, I know in British Columbia, we have some very specific regions that we look at. And I'm wondering if a more region-specific approach would be more appropriate for us to understand how to best have the fishers set up appropriately as climate change continues to occur.
Well, thanks for that, and also for your comment that the department does try to be flexible and to recognize when conditions change, that there could be changes that would assist our fish harvesters. And that's exactly why there's been so much focus on looking at this date. In terms of a regional management, the weir fishery is quite specific in a specific area of the fish habitat, and I don't envision that will impact or make changes to the rest of the capelin fishery. This would be for this specific two harvesters.
Thank you. And I guess I think I need to wrap up my time here, but how does this impact the licenses that these fishers receive or others in the area? Are there any changes to the licenses that need to be considered through this process?
Not that I know of. This is really about the terms and conditions of the fishery itself, and I do want to thank all the committee members for taking time in your constituency week to pay attention to matters that are not your constituents necessarily, and to be and for your interest in this. And the department has been very responsive to my requests that because this is a culturally significant fishery, albeit very, very minor in the grand scheme of capelin management, we're doing our best to address the requests of the fishers.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. We'll now go to Mr. Small for 5 minutes or less, please. You're on mute, Mr. Small.
There you go. That's the way to lose 20 seconds. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the Minister for coming here today and to all of her team, in fact. So, Minister, I heard you talking about a framework for capelin management. Last year's assessment and advisory committee was basically exactly a full month earlier than this year. So, a framework, would you consider a framework to be a process that works within consistent dates year to year?
Well, we certainly endeavor to do that, Mr. Chair, and through you to Mr. Small. But in fact, the work involved in this assessment, especially with respect to the weir fishery, is highly specialized. And this year's assessment was impacted by the unexpected unavailability of the unique expertise required. And so the department is working to ensure that others are trained on this highly specialized science, so that we won't have the situation again. But it did delay the delivery of the science assessments.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask the minister and our team, at what point was the data collected? I'm thinking it was last summer during the various fisheries, and that in fact there were no acoustic or trawl surveys done. So basically, you're operating on fisher persons logbooks and observers reports. So it seems to me you've had this data in your hands for quite a long time, and I don't understand why this is being so late, and why this is causing this fishery to be held back when you said earlier that it's very insignificant. And in 2020 and 2021, the quotas were set in 4RST at 9,300 tons each year, and from what I've heard, it's steady as it goes in terms of the stock in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So what do you have to say about that, Minister Murray?
Well, thank you. And what I have to say about that is that that in the last stock assessment conducted in March 2021, data related to bottom trawl catches and demersal fish diet were presented for the first time. So this year's stock assessment is actually integrating new sets of data into its analysis. And that is set to begin on April 20th. So the officials here with me today can, of course, provide more detail on the history of the science in this fishery and the importance of this year's data from next week's assessment, because it does bring in some new streams of information to try and make the analysis as accurate and effective as possible.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask the minister, does she think that maybe the capelin might be over foraged? We hear the phrase forage fish quite a bit, and we've seen herring in the Pacific and in Atlantic Canada, and the mackerel fishery in Atlantic Canada being shut down this year. So are we on the brink of a decision like that in the Gulf of St. Lawrence? Is that what this is all about?
Well, thanks for that question. And I think what this is all about is one MP working on behalf of her constituents to get an opening that is outside of the frame of this fishery. And so we're working to find a way to be more flexible in the opening for that particular heritage fishery. That's what this is about. And the total allowable catch for this fishery will be available soon, within virtually less than 2 weeks. And I expect to make it public at that time.
So given the fact that it's insignificant and stocks are stable, there's really not much reason to stop these fishermen from going ahead right now. Well, you say?
I would say, Mr. Chair, that that it is very important that we recognize that the framework for fishing is respected, because there are literally thousands of people whose lives and livelihoods depend on the fishery. There's hundreds of different stock at different levels of vulnerability in different fishing areas. And the way to ensure that the maximum economic benefit for individual harvesters and their communities is gained while not impacting the long-term conservation, viability, and health of the stock is to have a framework for each fishery. And it is very important that that framework is respected by the fish harvesters, and that there isn't efforts to try and poke holes in it and say, here's a reason why it doesn't count for me and I want to do my own thing. If that's done in one place, Mr. Small, that will be done in your area as well. And you can see the logic for that not being a good thing for the fishers, for the fish, or the management approach.
Do I have any more time, Mr. Chair?
No, you're gone way over, actually, Mr. Small.
Thank you.
We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for appearing. Always good to see you. What's happening right now? Do we know what's going on with the capelin? Are they spawning at this moment?
As far as I know, not. It's still iced up in the Weir Fishers area, but I may be a couple of days out of date, and I'll ask the regional experts to add to that answer.
Yes, please. They're there. We know it.
Oui, bonjour, merci.
Thank you for the question. My team was in contact with the people on Sunday, and the Kaplan hasn't come in yet. I haven't had any news since Sunday, but on Sunday, the Kaplan hadn't yet arrived.
So through the chair, is it fair then to say that had there been some success at getting an opening as of April 1st, there wouldn't have been any fish to catch?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, has there been wide variations in the spawning timing of capelin over the years, and particularly with respect to the impact of climate change?
9 out of 10 years, there has been no variation, and May 1st has been an opening date that served to provide this fishery. Last year, the spawning happened earlier, and though the date that in the frame was for May 1st. And so it was an exception year last year. And because that may become more common, it has not been common in the past, but should that change, we are looking to consult with other fishers around the flexibility for the Weir fishers to have an earlier open date, even though they may not be able to use that extra month for the most part.
Looking at the map, we have 4S, 4T, and 4R. Are the capelin runs different in each of those areas?
I'll ask my officials to explain the differences. That it is managed as one stock.
Yeah, I know that, yes, but I was wondering if it was just one big massive fish, or if there were differences, particularly between 4S and T and 4R.
Tony?
I would say the short answer is yes, there are some different variations depending on the area.
So I guess then the question becomes perhaps one of equity, and I believe this is something the minister referred to. If a fishery is allowed in area 4T, would this be an equitable or be seen as equitable by fishers in 4S and 4R?
That's the very reason that consultation with the harvesters is important when any change is being contemplated. My understanding is that most of the other areas have a later opening date, and so this would not necessarily benefit any other fisher whose zones are likely to be still iced in at April 1st.
Now, you say that the ice is out a little bit later. Is it all out usually by May 1st?
No, it's not. Some areas it's not until in May or even early June.
Is it then reasonable to suggest that Area 4T actually does get a head start even with an opening in May?
Yes, there is a head start because of ice conditions in that particular area.
Right. Thank you. That'll do me for this round, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. We'll now go to Madame Devienne for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will try to speak quickly but slowly enough for interpreters. Last year, capelin was ready to roll on the 3rd or 4th of April, and we can actually fish it now. There isn't any ice left. It's a question of tides and the moon cycles, etc. But I can tell you that there is no longer any ice, and we are ready to go to fish. I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, as well, that I think that we as members of parliament, as scientific researchers, have the obligation to show those who are listening to us that we have to be logical and use common sense. I think that is in our various jurisdictions anyway, that's the case. The fishers have lost 50% of their revenue last year. If we're talking about the end of April, it's basically the same as the 1st of May. They're going to lose 30% of their income, and so that is threatening the very existence of the fishery. So why is it that thus far we fishermen have not been consulted? I would also say that it's since the 9th of April 2021 that this request has been made to make do some scientific research and to hold consultations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I will ask my officials to answer the details of this question. My understanding is that the conditions are not such that that the fish are spawning on these beaches yet, so nothing is being lost this year. We are endeavoring to advance the opening date, and we're having discussions with other harvesters as we need to in our commitment to consult in making changes to an integrated fishery management plan. So I don't understand the member's assertion that the fisheries have been lost. We are responding to specific requests of 2 individuals, and whether they are specifically in the consultation or not, I will leave it to my department to let Madame Debienne know how consultation is organized.
So, Mr. Chair, perhaps I can add to that. So the next advisory committee is going to be held on April 25th, as I think members know, and certainly the 2 individuals will be very, very welcome to take part in those discussions. Our understanding of the ice conditions, there's still some ice. I'm looking at the daily ice chart for the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and there's still a lot of light blue in the Charlevoix area. Over the last 10 years, as the minister said, only 1 year did the capelin come before May 1. And even last year, fishers were able to go out and fish and make some income, as they have been able to do every year over the last 10 years.
Thank you, Madam Debienne. We'll now go to Ms. Barron for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Minister Murray, or through the chair to Minister Murray, I know in British Columbia there was an announcement regarding herring reductions, and the UFAW called on the government to invest $5 million to improve monitoring efforts for that fishery. I know that the FFAW on the East Coast also made a similar request in the wake of the mackerel announcement last month, and I'm wondering what investments this government has made in monitoring efforts to ensure that we have the best information available to make assessment decisions such as that we're speaking about today. Thank you.
Well, thanks for that question. And to the member, my goal is to grow the fish and seafood industry in Canada. It's an incredibly important one. A lot of export dollars, but to grow this, we need to have stock that are in healthy conditions. And that's why monitoring is so important. It is a key part of what the ministry does and what our scientists do. And I would like to turn it over to the officials around the question about how much money is invested in monitoring herring.
Yeah, I don't think we have that information to hand. Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify, is this herring across the country, or is this herring specifically in the West Coast or in 4RS&T?
I think just in general.
Just in
general. Sorry, I'm just
okay.
looking, yeah.
Okay, yeah, we can
Thank
certainly
you.
get you that information. Sorry,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we can certainly get the member that information.
Thank you. I'd be remiss to not ask while we're here, Minister Murray, one issue that's very important to constituents in my riding, and we're talking about workers and the impacts on fishers right now. And I wanted to put out there, we're seeing right now on the West Coast the impacts of the fish farms, the open net fish farms in our Pacific waters. There was a commitment made by the Liberal government to have these fish farms out of the Pacific waters by 2025, and instead we're seeing expansions to the fish farms. We're seeing right now sea lions that have been trapped in one of the fish farms in Clayoquot Sound, and they remain there as we speak. We know that there are detrimental impacts on our marine
Point of order,
ecosystem.
Mr. Chair. A point of order.
Yes, Mr. Hardy.
We are here to specifically focus on the capelin fishery in Madame Debienne's riding and the two weir fishers, and I think it's probably appropriate that we stick with that focus as opposed to broadening it, especially to the extent that Madame Barron is taking it.
I tend to agree, Mr. Hardy, but to Ms. Barron's time limit has gone way over, so we'll move on anyway at this point.
Thank you.
But I will remind members that Mr. Hardy is correct in the motion. It actually deals with the issue at hand, and that's exactly what we're supposed to be here for today.
Thank you,
so
Chair.
now I'll go to Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes or less, please. You're on mute, Mel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister for being here and to the officials. I'll move right into questions today. We've heard it mentioned that the science assessment done for this is quite complex. And then, Minister, I believe you spoke of a framework and that the assessment this year was impacted by the unavailability of specific expertise. Is that the lack of trained personnel to manage this fishery, or what were you referring to?
Well, thanks for that question. And what I would say is we need more trained personnel. So if the personnel that are trained are unavailable for some unexpected reason, that we have backup. And so that's exactly what we're doing. We're training some more of our region's personnel to be able to fill in.
And how many personnel would be in the region under the purview of DFO?
I'll turn that over to the deputy and his team to answer.
Sylvain?
Oui, bonjour, merci.
Thank you for the question. Well, the team was very important, but since there are various species of fish, when we're starting to look at issues like capelin.
Just really looking for overall numbers in the department.
Overall number, for the region, it's about, I would say, 150, 160 employees for the Quebec region only.
Okay, thank you. Minister, does DFO's 4RST capelin stock assessment cover the weir fishery that's in question?
My understanding is that this stock is managed as one unit, and so the assessments for the different parts of it would all be conducted, but the framework is determined and consulted on and made public as one fishery.
Okay, thank you. It's been reported that 30.4%, fewer than 1/3 of Canada's wild fisheries are currently considered healthy. What is DFO's classification of the capelin fishery in question? And does DFO consider the population to be healthy, in the cautious zone, or the critical zone?
That's the determination that the Ministry of scientists are doing as we speak, and there are meetings happening that will lead to the April 25th decision that will be made public at that time. But I'll turn it over to officials if there's anything they'd like to add.
Just to say, at this time, we don't have a precautionary approach, so we don't have it in the critical zone, the healthy zone, or the precautionary zone, which is not to say that we don't make decisions, and based on science, we do, and that's the science, as the Minister referred to. That science is going to be brought to the stock assessment on April 20th, and then to the advisory committee on the 25th.
Okay, thank you. Does this capelin population require a rebuilding plan?
At this point, if it has not been, if it's not framed in terms of the limit reference points, in other words, the critical zone, the cautious zone, and the healthy zone, then that would say there is no rebuilding plan at this point or underway. But as the member is aware that it is our commitment to bring rebuilding plans forward for any stocks and all stocks that are identified as being in the critical zone.
Okay, thank you. We know that capelin is a forage fish for other species harvested and in fisheries such as the cod fishery. How does DFO, or how do DFO rebuilding plans for species like cod that feed on capelin factor into the management decisions for forage fish such as capelin?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I'm looking forward to the answer. I think what the member is referring to here in general is the importance of forage fish as feed, as food for other important species like cod, but also Atlantic salmon or tuna on the East Coast. The forage fish are very critical to the whole ecosystem of the health of the oceans and the other fish that we count on, and that's why we pay attention to them. So I'll turn it over to the officials to add.
Adam?
Thanks, and thanks, Chair. And the Minister did absolutely correctly reflect the role that forage fish play, and we do have a policy frame including a bycatch policy to ensure we're not intercepting other fish in directed fisheries, as well as our forage fish policy, both of which are meant to help further guide management decisions to protect forage fish stocks, which do play such a critical role in the ecosystem, and as you note, or as the member noted, in ground fish recovery, such as cod.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. We'll now go to Mr. Morrissey for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the Minister. Minister, who is the advisory committee that will meet on 25th? Could somebody tell me who is this advisory committee? Give me a general makeup. How many fishers? How many on the bureaucracy?
I'll ask my officials to answer that question.
Tony?
I don't have the exact list, but it would be harvesters from the different fleet sectors and the different regions, as well as the processing sector and the DFO, as well as the provinces as well. Some of the provincial governments will be represented, and as well as the DFO. But I can get a detailed list, but I don't have that.
Has any of these other parties requested a change of the opening date on this fishery we're meeting on today, outside of the two fishers?
Not that I'm aware of.
So would I be correct in assuming that this is two individuals that want to do something that the rest of the industry is not fully on board with? Minister?
Or they certainly haven't made a statement about.
And yeah, I think that advisory committee meeting is happening on the 25th, so I don't have any information as to whether the members of the advisory committee believe that this is a request that makes sense or that they would support.
And there have been no requests from this committee to meet earlier, for that advisory committee to meet earlier?
Not that I'm aware of.
And that's a pretty broad reflective of the industry and the stakeholders involved. Would I be correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And Minister, could you opine on one part? Because what I see here is a couple of individuals that do not like the management practice that the global support. Do you get many requests from a group of fishers that are contrary to where the general industry wants to go? And if you manage the fishery that way, what would the fishery look like in Canada?
Well, I can't say that I have received requests from two individual fishers to make a change to an entire framework of a fishery. That's not been my experience.
Oh, so this incident has not reached out to you directly?
Sorry,
the two fishers involved here have not reached out to you directly to change this?
No, they didn't. They reached out to me through their member of parliament who I met with on this issue.
Okay, but if yes, often, and you know, as a public figure, I will often hear from various fishers with contrary points of view. And if we went down that road on every different direction we're asked to go, you would have a very, very different looking fishery, and I'm sure it'd be all that viable. So I can understand and use your comments. Public trust must be maintained in the process, and we do that through these advisory groups. Sometimes as a politician, I'm not happy with the decisions they make, but until this stage, I will err on accepting their decisions through this advisory process, which is made up of broad-based and using the science of the department to give us the best decision. And I'm pleased to see that that's a process that you will stay with. Mr. Chair, I don't have any further questions unless the minister wants to comment on my comments.
Well, thank you for that perspective, because there are indeed tens of thousands of people who for whom the fishery is very important for their livelihood and their communities, and we cannot manage it one by one to satisfy individual interests, and that's why having a framework for management of the fishery is so important for public trust and for conservation of the fishery, so that we can continue to have our fish and seafood be a really critically important economic driver for individuals, their families and their communities and our country.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. That completes 2 rounds of questioning. And Minister, it's my understanding, and I think the committee was informed that you were available for the first hour.
Yes.
If that is the case, that hour has been exhausted. But before you exit, I want to say thank you to you and your officials. And I know they're staying for the second hour, but I believe this is the 17th meeting that this committee has held, and you've been at 3 of them. So again, I want to say thank you for that. And it surely shows your interest in the committee and what we're actually doing as a committee. So again, thank you for your appearance today.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the commitment of all the committee members, as I had said before, to use a constituency week to prepare and attend this committee meeting.
Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
So we'll go on now with our next round of questioning, and we'll start off with Mr. Perkins for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you for the minister and officials for time. I'd like to maybe go back to where I left off, and I assume Mr. Chair will allow Deputy Minister Sargent to sort of be the gatekeeper as to who should answer the question, so I don't have to direct to which official, I assume. Getting the science right was one of the things, obviously, that the minister said in response to, I think it was Mr. Small's, one of Mr. Small's questions, and critical for this. So I'm going to go back to the issue of the fact that we've had now for at least a decade an integrated fisheries management plan for capelin in the 4RST area, and also, I believe, for the other main area of where capelin is fished, 2J3KL off Newfoundland. But the department seems to do science differently in that the other area, 2J3KL, has regular abundance surveys done.
Monsieur le Président, je n'ai pas de traduction. J'ai entendu un petit peu, mais...
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I don't have any interpretation anymore.
Okay, we'll get that checked on, because I'm not getting interpretation on what you have just said.
English interpretation, 1, 2, 3, 4. English interpretation.
Yep.
C'est Madame Desbiens.
Okay. All right.
C'est bon, merci beaucoup.
Seems to be there now, so we'll continue.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I also have a bit of my COVID cough still, so I'll try not to cough into the microphone. I won't repeat what I already said. I think, or should I start again on that for Madame Desbiens? Should I start over on my question?
Ben, j'aurais aimé ça, oui, mais bon.
I would have liked that, yes, but I don't want to waste your time either.
So I'm just going to pick up where I left off before. The minister said that getting the science right, obviously, is something we all aspire to. And I'm going to come back to the fact that there's one of the most vital parts of the science for capelin in NAFO 4RST doesn't seem to be done. We've had a plan for more than 10 years. The Integrated Fisheries Management Plan talks about maybe a plan to do a plan on the science. I'm not getting an answer particularly when or how long that's going on. While off of Newfoundland in 2J3KL, we do an abundance survey regularly. I should say DFO does an abundance survey regularly and therefore has a better understanding of the size of the stock. And so I'm going to come back to again with my question on why is there no abundance survey being done on capelin in this area in order to be able to provide a better management plan in terms of the TAC that's set every year, as well as some other marketing initiatives that would come. We haven't changed the TAC much over the last few years. It basically stays between 8,000 to 10,000 tons. And perhaps if we had a better sense of the size of the biomass, we would have a different TAC for fishers and more opportunity. So could you explain to me why after all these years and 10 years in a fisheries management plan, we're still not doing an abundance survey every year in this region?
Sylvain?
C'est ça, je voudrais revenir parce que
First of all, thank you very much for the question. I said earlier that in the past, we didn't have any indication of abundance, but when I look at the initiatives taken over the past few years to integrate the information of the catches in 4R, and if you look at the data from the department, based on that information, we might be able to have an indication of the abundancy that will be presented at the next meeting of the scientific group next week. And so there has been a lot of improvement made in that area.
But you're not doing the sounding stuff. This is a mathematical formula based on landings and market, not based on actual science of the size of the biomass. So I'm wondering when that will be done. That's my first part. And then the second part, of course, is that without that, there's an eco certification that the product cannot get because we don't have an idea of whether or not we're fishing this responsibility other than basically algorithms based on landings and market need rather than the actual biomass. So when we talk about science being critical, I don't understand why we haven't made the effort in this region to do that part of the science.
Sylvain?
Oui, ben, comme j'ai dit.
Well, as I was saying, things are improving. We use the commercial survey of income that applies to various regions, and then we continue to apply the indicators.
There is no plan to do an eco science. The last question, I think, before my time runs out, is predation is an issue with all fish species, and the Integrated Fisheries Management Plan talks about the predators of capelin being cod, halibut, and turbot. Of course, cod and turbot not being very robust stocks, so not posing, I assume, much of a threat. I'm curious as to why the abundance surveys don't mention seals, since seals also consume capelin. in terms, sorry, the predation in the integration management plan doesn't mention seals as a predator. And are you looking at seals as a predator?
So, well, actually, maybe I'll chime on this. I mean, we don't have any evidence that capelin are a really important part of seal diet. Of course, capelin are not very big. I think the predators that we focus on, the ones that you that the member mentioned, but I would also note redfish as well as a potential predator for capelin, and something that we need to take into account as we look at potentially reopening part of that fishery.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My time is probably up, I think.
Yes, it is. Right on, Mark. We'll now go to Mr. Cervera for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. McDonald, nice to see you and nice to see my colleagues this week. I hope we're all having a productive constituency week, and I want to wish everyone, before I begin, a wonderful Easter long weekend or Passover or Ramadan, whichever folks may be celebrating. This is my first time, I think, I sat on Fisheries and Oceans Committee in my 6.5 years in Parliament. But ironically, I do want to add before I begin my questioning that a number of decades ago, I grew up in a fishing town in Prince Rupert, British Columbia. So I'm very familiar with the operations at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Worked in a cannery. Many of my mother and many of her sisters clean salmon or filleted salmon, I should use the word, because it is filleted, not clean. And I worked at J.S. McMillan Fisheries for 3 summers, and that was great money. So I know what herring is, and herring roe and groundfish and crab and seiners and trollers and gill netters and all those wonderful folks, because they were all my friends in high school and my neighbors. I saw the industry transform itself and reduce considerably, and the catches unfortunately declined. But nonetheless, it provided a stable income for many thousands of families where I grew up. So it's sort of near and dear to my heart, Ken, and it's kind of ironic that I'm here. But going on to this, to capelin, to the department officials, I just wanted to talk about the consultation process in this sort of area and others. How important is that to have this consultative process and open line of communication with the people fishing these stocks?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. It's very, very important. Of course, fishers are out on the water. I mean, they see things that we don't necessarily do. It's very important to get their input, and it's very important to get that input in a coordinated way. And that's why we have our advisory committee process, so we can actually get everybody in the room, so people can hear other people. We can actually have a conversation about what people have seen out on the water, what their views are, how they interpret the science, how they come at the science, so we can actually have that integrated discussion, and so everybody can hear everything that's been said.
Of course, and just to follow up on that, the stock assessment that's done, the confidence interval on that, and specifically with this species of fish, I had never heard of capelin until today. I'll be frank, but in terms of the confidence interval you have with regards to the stock assessment of this species, how confident are we? Because I know how important this is. You can open up a fishing season, at 12 o'clock at midnight, and open up for 12 hours, and if you're wrong, we know that the issues there, obviously with number of tons that are allocated. But how confident are we on this species per se?
Capelin are one of the more difficult species to forecast and therefore manage. They have relatively short lifespans. The populations are often consist of a few key age groups, so you'll have kind of a big population in a couple of years with a small population. So what that means is it's quite variable. A lot of the fluctuations we see are more driven by environmental factors and than they are fishing activity itself, which is not to say that fishing activity doesn't play a role, but whereas fishing activity is easy to monitor, often the environmental conditions are not. So it is one with, it has a wider margin of error than some other species that we manage that live longer, are much more predictable.
Okay. And final question, in recent years, and I'm not sure how long Mr. Sargent, you've been on this file, and thank you for your answers. In recent years, have you seen changes with regards to, like, climate change and environmental factors impact the size of the catch, which is being taken back to port and so forth?
Across all of what we do, we certainly see the impacts of climate change on both coasts, as we see species often moving north to some extent, although that's not true everywhere. We have seen significant changes in the Gulf, for instance. But I'm just going to turn to Tony for capelin itself, if you can talk about the trends in that stock.
Yeah, I'm not sure we'd call them trends, but there is some variability over the years of the size of capelin when it's mature and taken into fisheries. So yes, what exactly is causing that, we don't know exactly, but the environmental conditions but what environmental conditions, I mean, we don't know exactly.
Okay, sir, Ken, how much time do I have left, or am I used it up already?
You've got about 16 seconds, so hardly enough time to get a question and an answer in. So I think we'll probably cut it off there.
I would concur with that, Ken. And thank you, everyone. Great to see everyone today.
Thank you. We'll now go to Madame Desbiens for 2.5 minutes, please.
Boy, 2.5 minutes isn't much time. Thank you very much. First of all, two things. Despite what I hear, well, we have capelin running for 2 days now. I'm sorry, for the past 2 days, we have seen the capelin and our fishers are losing money, and it really is clear that they're going to lose some income. The fishers wrote the minister and the officials a letter twice. Now, 3 times, actually, we sent a file in that was prepared by scientists and experts in Quebec that confirm that the capelin in Quebec has no link with what's going on in Newfoundland. I'm fuming here. So, if you can promise that our fishers are going to be invited to the consultation table in April, then I would like you to confirm with me that you're absolutely certain that the capelin that is dying on our shores is actually wreaking havoc in what's going on in the St. Lawrence right now.
So if I understand correctly, firstly, will the 2 individuals be invited to the advisory committee? So absolutely yes. And I think we have their contact details, but we would, I think as a matter of course, invite them. As to what's actually going on, I mean, I'm here in Ottawa. So if someone's standing on the shore and looking at capelin, then I'm not going to say that person is necessarily wrong. I mean, I see the ice conditions. I know that this is a regular ice year.
Je suis à l'île aux Coudres.
I'm at Île aux Coudres, and I see it. I see the capelin.
Vous comprenez, Monsieur le Président?
You understand, Mr. Chairman, that usually I'm very calm, but it breaks my heart, Mr. Chairman, because you're going to see 2 fishers here disappearing. They have a very particular type of fishing, and it has nothing to do with what's going on off the coast of Newfoundland. You have to understand what weir fishing is. We catch the capelin that are not going to die on the shore anyway. I don't know what more to say. I'm just beside myself here. Are you able to explain to us why, since in the past year you've understood the problem?
Minutes allotted. We'll now go to Ms. Barron for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. To clarify, is it expected that I'll have 2 rounds of questions before the end of the meeting, or just 1 remaining?
We should get another slot after this one if everybody finishes on time and we stay on schedule.
Great. I do have a few further questions, but I think if it's okay with you, Chair, I'd like to offer my 2.5 minute slot that we're currently in right now to Madame Desbiens, so she's able to finish what she was trying to say, if she would like it.
Okay, over to you, Madame Desbiens.
Merci, mon Dieu, ça va me...
Thank you. All right, it brings my smile back. Is there a possibility, in your view, Mr. Sargent or Mr. Vizina, is there a possibility of considering the weir fishing exercise being evaluated differently from elsewhere in the region so that you're comparing apples with apples?
Just come off from mute here. I think when we do our assessments, we are very conscious of the difference between the weir fishery and the other two fisheries that are out there, as we are between the 4ST fishery and the 4R fishery. So it's one stock. So the science that we do is on that stock, and it informs the fisheries management. But that fisheries management approach is sensitive to the different realities and the different kind of gear that are being used in these different regions, which is why the openings can be different.
Donc, vous êtes en mesure de...
So you are able to see that we're not dealing with a viable resource that is going to continue to feed the huge number of predators that exist in the St. Lawrence. I'd like to draw your attention to a document that I handed out to everybody. In fact, it's some female capelin from Ontario. I don't know when it was caught. And it was packaged in Thailand. And it was available in Charlevoix just because the population here absolutely love capelin and everybody wants to buy it. So the suppliers saw this product from Thailand. Are you aware of that? You wouldn't believe what I see on my Facebook. It's just exploding on my Facebook, all of this entire story.
Yeah, I haven't seen the document that the member is referring to, but more than happy to see it.
C'est quelque chose.
It's really something to see. It's a package of capelin, and it's just unbelievable to see it. And the color of it is just horrible. All right. I am hopeful that in the minister's mandate letter, and in fact, in Boston, during her speech, she said that she wants to encourage local development and buy local and limit transport of our goods. So I would like to hear your intentions with regard to that, and what you're going to do to encourage the minister to allow this imminent fishery, because I don't want to be importing some product from Thailand. I would like to know how you're going to broach this topic with the minister.
Way over your time, actually, Madam Debbie, and if the officials have an answer to that particular statement, if they could provide it to the committee, we'd appreciate that. We'll now go to Mr. Small for 5 minutes or less, please. You're on mute.
I can't hear the member.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chair. My question to Mr. Sargent is about something that he said earlier, mentioning that capelin are the significant food source for seals. I think your own department is estimating that seals consume between let me see here, between 1 and 1.5 million tons of capelin per year. Now, that's just harp seals alone, and we know that the Gulf of St. Lawrence is also full of gray seals. So what percentage of the harp seal stock, the harp seal herd, resides in the Gulf of St. Lawrence? Do you have any idea?
I'll turn to, I don't know, Sylvain, if you have that to hand.
I'm sorry, I don't have this information with me.
Okay, we can get you our best estimate, Mr. Chair.
Would we say a third of the harp seal herd, exists in the Gulf of St. Lawrence for 7 or 8 months of the year? I think that might be accurate. Maybe in that case, you're talking 500,000 tons of capelin being consumed by harp seals alone in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Would you dispute that with that figure, Mr. Sargent?
I mean, I'm certainly not arguing that harp seals don't eat capelin. I think what I said is they're not. When we look at what are the major food sources that harp seals rely on, I wouldn't say capelin was the mainstay of their diet.
Yeah. Well, just looking at the size of that capelin fishery there in 4RST, around 9,000 tons. Not a lot of capelin compared to 1 to 1.5 million tons consumed by harps alone. So I just wanted to make reference to that for the record. So how many other capelin fisheries in the Atlantic coast have a fixed opening date, or is it just this one?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, you mean for capelin? Sorry, or does the member mean for capelin?
Yes, capelin.
Capelin. Tony, can you talk about the capelin openings across all of the stock? Oh, sorry, across the different areas.
Yeah, so in the Gulf, the rest of the Gulf, and then on the northeast coast of Newfoundland, it is not fixed as such. It's variable, and it's depending on the availability and the condition of the capelin. There's a significant consultation with the industry to determine the opening dates in the various areas. So it's not a fixed date. It is fixed in regulations, but it's varied each year to reflect the conditions.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Blanchard. Possible to have that happen with consultation with these fishers in the estuary of the St. Lawrence in a similar fashion?
That would be correct, right? Right, Sylvain?
Yes.
Okay. So that just seems a little bit odd, and I guess that's the reason for the meeting here today. That this policy is so out of line with the rest of the capelin policy in Atlantic Canada. So I guess it's going to be too late this year. Do you think that there's going to be a big change? You must have some information by this at this point. It's been quite a long time since you collected all that data. You must have some idea as to what the outcome of the assessment's going to be by now. You must have preliminary information. Do you think there's going to be massive cut in that capelin quota, or like if it's going to stay status quo, you could quickly make a decision to let that capelin fishery open?
So a few things on that. I mean, we collect samples over the summer, but then those samples have to be processed, and that takes a couple of months. So that's actually a more lengthy process than one might think. And then there's analysis that has to be done as well. There's also other data on environmental factors, and we often don't get that data until later in the year. So it does actually take a while for that science to get done. And certainly, I don't think we as a department want to get out ahead of the science assessment or the advisory committee as well. We want to have all of the information before we come to a conclusion. And so I very deliberately, do not, we don't interfere. I as deputy don't interfere earlier in that process. So we let it play out.
Thank you, Mr. Small. Thank you, Mr. Small. Your time has gone a little bit over, actually. We'll now go to Ms. Sudds for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And this is certainly a new topic for me, but interestingly enough, I have witnessed capelin on a trip to Newfoundland with my family a few years ago, so I do know what we're talking about. A few questions. So the minister mentioned in her remarks that the next 4 RST stock assessment is scheduled to begin, I believe it was next week. Can you explain for me what new scientific information will be included in this stock assessment?
Sylvain, do you want to talk a little bit about our science in 4RS? And then Tony, if you've got anything to add.
Oui, OK. Merci pour la question. Bien, en ce moment,
Thanks for the question. Right now, the data that we're going to have are they pertain to the ships in Newfoundland that do Capeland fishing. We look at bycatch as well. There are also biological samplings that go on to help the department look at specifics, and that's all the information that we're going to use to find the indicators, to determine the indicators about the fish stock.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that. So recognizing that stock assessments are obviously an important scientific element to fisheries management and ensuring that our fishing practices are sustainable, can you explain how a stock assessment typically factors into establishing the total allowable catch?
Yeah, maybe Adam, I'll ask you to walk through the mechanics of that.
Absolutely, and thanks for the question. So the process that we use to develop advice to provide to the minister to inform her decision making would start for sure with the science advice, and that forms the foundation of the advice, which is supplemented with perspectives from Indigenous groups, the fishing industry, provinces, and others with an interest in the fishery, which we obtain through our advisory committee process. We'd also provide the minister with socioeconomic analysis to inform her of, the various potential impacts of her decision. And so those three key pieces, as well as Indigenous knowledge, when that is made available to us, are the basis for the advice that the department would provide the minister, framed in the context of our various policies under the Sustainable Fisheries Framework, such as the forage fisheries policy and the bycatch policy, as well as the precautionary approach policy.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. So I'm sure all of us today can agree that it's important that the voices of fish harvesters, the industry itself, coastal communities are part of this decision-making process and are listened to as we move forward. So can you speak to the role of the Capeland Advisory Committee and the importance of engaging with industry about any potential changes?
Tony, do you want to talk about the advisory committee?
Sure. It's a very important piece of the process. So we get to hear directly from the stakeholders, and particularly on the advice that the science is providing, and they can give their perspectives as well, but also on any of the management measures that are considered to be changed or in place, and what the implications are for them. So it gives us their perspective when we're considering requests such as the one that we expect to have discussed at the advisory upcoming.
Terrific. Thank you very much for that. And I know it was discussed earlier, kind of what the composition of that advisory committee looks like as well, which I think is so important that it properly reflects the industry. I think I'm out of time, so I'll concede, but thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Ms. Sudds. It was close. It was about 14 seconds left, so I appreciate that. We'll now go on to Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you to the officials for being here. I guess I'll direct my questions through Mr. Sargent, and he can determine which other department official may be best to answer. Could you tell us what the stock assessment trends have been for Capeland over the past number of years?
Tony, do you want to talk about that? I guess I would say that this stock has been quite volatile, and so I suspect what Tony's going to say is that it's difficult to tease out, real trends from that. But Tony?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you said. It's been particularly in 4 RSTs we're talking. It's been a bit up and down, but nothing major up or major down, so sort of been up or down at a consistent level, I guess.
Okay, thank you. And what factors has the department identified as possible contributing factors to any upward or downward population cycles?
Tony?
I think the major driver is environmental conditions. And we can't pinpoint specifically which ones of those, but it appears environmental conditions are the major driver in the capelin abundance.
When you say environmental conditions, is that climatic and ocean temperature conditions, or is that other environmental conditions such as predation and so on?
All of the above, I would think.
So predation is one of those potential factors in there?
Potentially. Probably the climatic conditions are more impactful.
And what work is the department doing to try and determine which factors may be more influential?
Those are the things that would be discussed during the science assessment each year.
Mm-hmm. And have those been discussed in previous years?
Yes.
And what was identified in previous years?
I think there's the water temperature for sure, food for the capelin, those types of things. I don't have the specifics in front of me now to give you, but those types of things.
Okay. What steps are available to the department to address declining trends or a low assessment?
Just to clarify, Mr. Chair, I mean in terms of fisheries management measures or in terms of getting more data?
What tools are available to the department to turn around a low assessment?
In terms of fisheries management, Mr. Chair, I mean obviously we can adjust things like opening dates in an effort-based fishery. We can adjust tax when there are quantitative limits. We can place restrictions around kinds of gear. I mean, those are all tools, fisheries management tools that we have used in general, although not necessarily in this fishery or in all parts of this fishery.
And has the department ever looked at overall ecological conditions such as predator-prey ratios as part of the tools?
I mean, our assessments are designed to look at the environmental factors. As we've discussed, predation is a factor. So, to the best of our ability, we try to understand what those predation factors are, and they obviously feed into where we think the stock is going and how effective our management measures will be.
Okay, thank you. I want to change a line a little bit here. It looks like this entire management area is managed as one large zone, and we have a couple of harvesters that are impacted that would have a very small impact on the overall TAC or the fishery in general. And yet the fishery is their fishery is being restricted in their position. I want to relate that to a different scenario on the West Coast. We have interior Fraser steelhead that are on the brink of extinction. They come all the way up into the North Okanagan Shuswap in my riding up the Fraser system. And there are other harvest fisheries that are implicated or suggested may be impacting those stocks, which are on the verge of collapse. And yet those fisheries remain open. Can you explain the difference in the management system, two different management systems?
I mean, for the 4RST capelin, so when we say that we treat it as one stock, that means that the science is done on a stock-wide basis, that we have one stock assessment meeting, we have one advisory committee that deals with the stock, but that doesn't mean that the stock is managed in the same way for each of the sub areas, if you like. So that's why, for instance, the Weir fishery that we're all here today to discuss opens at a different time from the 4R and 4S fisheries. And of course, they use different gear types. So we do actually have the flexibility, even if we manage it as one stock, to have different opening dates and a variety of different approaches to the fish management. So the stock is really referring to the science part and the assessment of the stock. But the actual fisheries management tools can certainly differ depending on local circumstances.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. We'll now go to, I'm sorry, Mr. Arnold. We're going to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less.
You can hardly tell us apart, I know. Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Sargent, does DFO not have people on the ground in Madame Debienne's riding to actually witness for themselves what the ice conditions are?
We certainly have a lot of information about ice conditions. As I say, we publish a daily chart on ice conditions, which I look at pretty much every day, and I have right in front of me. Coast Guard, has a whole group of people who do that. It's obviously very important for mariners. The question is, though, I think, are there capelin that are actually coming up onto the beach to spawn? We don't necessarily have people standing there kind of watching for them. We certainly do have a significant, we do have a presence in the Charlevoix region itself. We have, CMP officers and others. But Sylvain, do you want to speak to our presence on the ground?
No, I actually, yeah? if I could, I have limited time here. Okay. I mean, the property of weir fishing versus the other kinds, I presume, seiners, whatever, in terms of timing and productivity, I mean, is it not possible to go to, I think, the core of Madame Debienne's, reason for wanting this particular session? Is it not possible to have an earlier start for the weir fishers, or is it, sort of, if you do it for one, you've got to do it for all of 4S and 4T?
We can certainly, we can certainly have an earlier opening for the weir fisheries. If as we come out of the advisory committee, that's something that folks are comfortable with, and then the minister currently makes the decision. So yeah, we can certainly open the weir fishery earlier.
Now, once the fishery is opened, is there a catch limit or a time limit involved? In how long the fishery can go on once it's opened?
No, for this particular fishery, it's once it's open, they can go out and catch as much as they want, and take as long to do that as they would like. Of course, it is a fishery, though, that it only happens for a very short period. So you've got to catch them, around the spawning. Once they've spawned, they'll come offshore, and then they actually ultimately die. So you can't wait until July if they've spawned in May or even June.
I mean, with respect to all my colleagues, I'm wondering why we're having this emergency session when, in fact, it's so late that the sort of start that Madame Debienne was looking for is long gone, and likely not, there won't really be much of a material earlier starting, even if somebody today made the decision to go out and start fishing. And I guess the one sticking point is, through to Mr. Sargent, you said that this is pretty much the only capelin fishery that has a set date, that all of the other dates are for the start of the fishery are determined by conditions. And so I wonder why that could not happen with this particular part of the fishery.
Maybe, Tony, do you want to speak to the opening dates for all of the different component fisheries here and how that works?
Sure, and as I said earlier, yes, it is determined in the other areas for the fleets based on the condition of the capelin, availability of the capelin, and that's something that could be considered in this one as well. I think that may be some of the discussion that happens at the advisory committee meeting.
But at this point, if the weir fishery is allowed to go forward, and if they're allowed to catch as much as they can catch, this would obviously be an advantage to that form of fishing over the other forms. Is that correct?
Technically, yes, but it's a very small portion of the overall catch usually.
Usually. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no further questions.
Thank you for that, Mr. Hardy. We'll now go to Madame Debienne for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hardy raised a question that was interesting. In fact, I raised the issue at the beginning of this emergency meeting because every day counts. The principle is that every day we fish a limited amount of capelin, and the rest of it is processed. Some of it is used fresh and the rest is processed. So every day there is some income that is not going to come back. So that's why every day is critical. These people have financial troubles because last year they lost half of their income because of this date restriction. So what I'm hearing here is that it's only capelin weir fishers who have an opening date, whereas the others have some fluidity. It depends on when the resource comes, and it's impossible to make some special provision to allow them to fish. On what basis can we work that way to stop that fishery? And can we live with our conscience saying that, you know, maybe next year, because of what we are not doing here, they are not going to be even in existence anymore?
So we can certainly, Mr. Chair, we can certainly, and we are looking at how, you know, what people think about the idea of opening that fishery at April 1 next year, and you know, and what that would apply, and that will be what the advisory committee will discuss. And you know, if the advisory committee thinks you know, has a favorable view of that, you know, that will go to the minister, and then she can take a decision at that point.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
At the end, we'll now go to Ms. Barron for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I guess something I didn't mention is that although the West Coast is now my home, I did want to mention that my roots are in Newfoundland. And although I am what many in Newfoundland would refer to as a townie, my family every year excitedly got in our cars and drove to the beach to see the capelin as they washed up on the shores. So I can appreciate what it is that we're talking about today. I was wondering if we could expand a little bit around forage fish such as capelin, mackerel, and herring. We know that they are vitally important to the abundance and health of our marine environments, coastal communities, and also the livelihoods of fishers that rely on them. We know that they're an important food source for many species, and we've talked about this, including whales, seabirds, and even fish that are caught commercially. Unfortunately, we have seen that some forage fish populations have been overfished in years prior, and we know that unless action to manage them sustainably, there will be irreversible harm to the future populations, and as well, the fishers' livelihoods will be lost in the process. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit around the important role of forage fish, you know, just expand on that a little bit, and let us know what steps you will take to set quotas or pause fisheries to rebuild these important species and to ensure a sustainable future for both our marine environments and the fishers' livelihoods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. As the member notes, I mean, forage fish are a key element of the food chain. You know, they prey on small marine creatures, and then, you know, are themselves preyed upon by larger creatures. Certainly, and I want to be clear for the record, I mean, I think harp seals do consume capelin. Capelin is an important part of their diet, but we don't have evidence to suggest that is the key determinant of capelin populations. But I do want to place on the record that we do think that harp seals do, you know, eat capelin as well as they eat a whole bunch of other things. In terms of the measures that we're taking on forage fish, and we're going to be turn to Adam at this point. We have a policy on forage fish because of their importance in the marine ecosystem. So again, I'll have Adam speak to that if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, so absolutely, and within the sustainable fisheries framework, there's a variety of policies that would apply to forage fish. Including the precautionary approach framework, the rebuilding plan, components of that for stocks in the critical zone. But more generally, it's always particularly important for us to carefully consider the science advice and the stock status of forage stocks for the reasons that the member noted in terms of their critical role in the ecosystem. So certainly that is at the core of the minister's considerations and some of the recent decisions that she's taken, which have been mentioned here today. And certainly in the case of the Capelin decisions that are forthcoming, those important considerations will also be front and center because, as you note, the recovery and the health of the ecosystem is very fundamentally linked to the health of forage fish stocks within that ecosystem.
Thank you. Chair, do I have time for another question?
No, I'm sorry, you don't.
Okay. Forgot to time. Thank you.
We'll go on to Mr. Perkins for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the acknowledgement that harp seals eat capelin amongst other things. They'll eat your kitchen sink, I think, if they're hungry, but they'll consume everything. They are eating everything in the ocean. And in this particular case, you've acknowledged that the weir fishing has little impact on the overall catch of the tack or the stock, and that you're open to flexibility in the future. We're hoping that there'd be a little now, but I understand the process you have to go through. Basically, as we've said earlier, the tax seems to have been set at around 9,000 tons, mainly recently. Are you having trouble hearing me, Mr. Chair? Okay. The fisheries management plan says that the catch levels for fishing of capelin in this area, fishing mortality, has no noticeable effects on the capelin population. So in the absence of acoustic sounding, in the absence of that important part of the science, in the absence of knowing the size of the biomass, I take it we're just doing what we've always done in terms of the TAC rather than seeing what we can do going forward, since apparently the fishing has no impact and other predation and other issues must be driving the levels, or the fact that, we haven't gotten back to those days in the 70s, I think, where it might have been 200,000 metric tons that were being caught.
I mean, Mr. Chair, as Sylvain said, I mean, we do have some new things that are going to come to the advisory, to the stock assessment. We have a combined index of the stock state. We have some predictive empirical work that we've done. It is certainly, as I said earlier, like this is a volatile, well, it is a stock that at least, our information about it is not as good as we would like. It's, as I say, relatively short-lived. It can be volatile, or at least the data that we see are volatile. We do have some other indicators, environmental conditions, that we think are important. But yeah, we know less about this. Of course, with the precautionary principle, that wouldn't be a reason. I mean, that would be a reason for us to be cautious about additional fishing effort here. Just because we don't have a lot of information doesn't mean that we can obviously go off and allow people to fish as much as they want. So we do have to be cautious here. In the light of data we have some, it's not as good as we have for some other fisheries, though. We certainly admit that.
Mr. Chair and Deputy, I appreciate that, but and I am a bit of a broken record, but without the acoustic sounding knowledge of the biomass, it's impossible for the fishers who fish this to get an eco-certified international stamp, which would help in the development of the export market. So that's a statement that we don't seem to really have a good handle on this and where it is. So as long as we keep getting, reasonable size capelin in around these levels, seems to be how we manage it. And to me, it would seem to me that a serious plan would treat capelin in this area the same as we treat it in the other part of Newfoundland, which is to do acoustic sounding. And is that a resource issue that you just that the department doesn't have the financial ability to do that, or doesn't have the equipment to do it in the Gulf?
I mean, we certainly have limited resources, and we have to prioritize how we do that. I mean, we look at the size of the different fisheries and the economic importance when we make those decisions. And we just can't do everything that we would like to do for every species.
I appreciate that. I think I will turn the rest of my time over to Mr. Small if I have any time left.
You have 20 seconds.
Oh.
Well, thank you. I guess we're just wondering if your new assessment tools are going to change the low reference point for capelin as it did in 3PS cod in 2019, which showed that the cod was in a critical zone. And are we expecting that with capelin, and this is why that fishery can't be open right now?
So, Mr. Chair, the reason the fishery is not open right now is because we have a process to go through before we change the date. It's not because we have new information or information to determine a limit reference point. We still are we're not at the point where we have the information to have a full precautionary approach that would have a limit reference point.
Thank you, Mr. Small. We've got a couple of minutes left. Mr. Morrissey, I understand you're going to have a question or two. When you're ready, please.
Thank you, Chair. It appears we've pretty well canvassed much of the information and data on this subject, but for clarification, there was a reference to the capelin coming up in the shore and spawning, and they're dying. But that fishery is not controlled. If they come up on the shore, is that called a recreational fishery, and anybody can go and scoop them up on the beach?
No. Sylvain, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, well, of course, if people go on the beach and take the fish, is a recreational fishery. But here, what we're talking about, it's a two license holder who
Yes, I realize that, but there was the reference that they're coming on the beach and they're going to waste or dying. People can't get them. But if you want to go as a tradition in Newfoundland and scoop them up and bring them home, you can do that regardless of the date. Am I correct?
Yes, Adam, do you have any idea?
Yeah, they would have to be dead, I believe.
And who's there to ascertain the mortality? I'm being a bit facetious on it, on the question, but I want. Yeah, it is a wonderful statement. One question for clarification, Chair. Was there a request to open the date earlier last year? And if there was, because there was somebody quoted it earlier. What context was that in, if there was a request last year to open the date earlier in the reasoning? Mr. Surgeon?
Yeah, sorry, Sylvain, do you want to just talk through the timing last year?
Yes, thank you for the question. L'année dernière, on a reçu
Last year, we got the stock assessment. The consultation occurred in March. The request that was made to change the opening date for the fishery for weir fishing, it was, I believe, the 6th of April, and the consultation, the new consultation, is just going to take place next week, and so that gives you an idea of the chronology of the events.
Okay, I'm not sure you understood the question. My question was there a request last year to open the date earlier, early, and what was the reasoning for that request last year?
Par la période, on a reçu comme j'ai dit.
Well, as I said, We got the request to open the fishery, to open it earlier next year, and we got that on April 9th, and that was for this year.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think my time has gone out, and I'm not sure the question was fully understood because the answer really didn't line up with my question.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. That kind of closes up our session. I want to say thank you to the departmental officials for taking part in our meeting today. I especially want to thank Mr. Blanchard for appearing, fellow Newfoundland and Labradorian, and for everything he does as the RDG in Newfoundland for our fishers and our fishing communities. I want to say a huge thank you to him from the committee. We'll allow the members the invited guests to sign off just for a second before we close up. Okay, I see it's just committee members now. I just wanted to make a bit of a statement. I just want to make a very small statement. When it comes to members questioning time, like you can chew it all up in an opening statement or chew up the best part of it making a statement, but it takes away from your actual time to get a question in. And I try to be as free as I can be with people's time. I mean, and especially to Madam Debian and Ms. Barron. I mean, 2.5 minutes, if it involves a large statement before you get to a question, it doesn't give you much time even to get an answer. And it's easier in the 5-minute and 6-minute slots. But just to keep that in mind, because I hate being the bad guy at the end and say, oh, sorry, your time is up, because you didn't actually get in a time even for a lengthy or a more detailed question. So again, I just ask members to keep that in mind, please, going forward. I want to say thank you to all the staff that made this possible today, our clerk and our analysts and our interpretation people, and of course to our members of the committee and our fill-in members for the day. Thank you for making this meeting another enjoyable one. It's our 17th. And everything seems to be going along quite well, I think, from up to this point, and let's hope it stays that way. Meeting is adjourned. Have a good Easter weekend, one and all.
Happy